This show is part of OnePlace, a daily network of focused briefings across the stories people follow most.
Welcome to our daily roundup. We have a packed show today covering major legal battles, global economic shifts, and the personal challenges facing workers and families across the country. Let's dive in.
Elon Musk and Sam Altman face off in federal court.
BP reports a massive profit jump amid global conflict.
Critics slam energy giants for profiting during wartime instability.
American daughters face a growing crisis in elder care responsibilities.
Retailers warn of looming price hikes at the supermarket.
Public outrage grows over astronomical oil company revenue figures.
A prominent CEO labels remote work as career suicide.
G7 central banks prepare to hold interest rates steady.
First, the OpenAI trial.
The legal showdown between Elon Musk and Sam Altman officially begins today with jury selection. This high-profile case, brought by the Tesla CEO, alleges that OpenAI has strayed far from its original nonprofit mission. Musk claims the company, which he co-founded in 2015, has prioritized corporate profits over its goal of benefiting humanity. Since the launch of ChatGPT in 2022, OpenAI has ballooned into a massive enterprise valued at roughly $85 billion. Musk is seeking to have Altman removed from the board and wants an unspecified amount of money to fund the charitable arm of the organization. It is a battle over the soul and the future control of artificial general intelligence.
OpenAI has not stayed silent, calling the lawsuit a baseless and jealous attempt to derail a competitor. They pointed out that Musk's own AI company, xAI, operates the Grok chatbot, which competes directly with their products. The trial is expected to be a dramatic event, featuring testimony from two of the most influential figures in tech. Judge Yvonne Gonzalez-Rogers will make the final decision, though a jury will serve in an advisory role. The core dispute really centers on who gets to control and profit from this transformative technology. Musk stepped down from the board in 2018 but donated $44 million before pulling his support when the company shifted toward its current for-profit structure.
Next, BP's financial results.
BP has reported a massive jump in profits for the first quarter of 2026, largely driven by the ongoing Iran war. The oil major revealed a profit of nearly $3.2 billion, which is more than double what they earned in the previous quarter. This figure significantly exceeded what analysts had predicted. The company credited an exceptional contribution from its oil trading operations, which thrived as energy prices surged following the start of the conflict in late February. While the world grapples with the instability of war, BP's new CEO, Meg O'Neill, noted that the business is running well operationally. They are seeing high refining availability and increased production in the U.S. onshore business, despite the global disruption.
The surge in energy prices is not just a win for oil companies, it is a major concern for central banks. As oil and gas prices spiked in March, inflation expectations across the Eurozone increased significantly. New data from the European Central Bank shows that perceived inflation over the last year has jumped to 3.5%. This puts immense pressure on policymakers who are meeting this week to decide on interest rates. While BP is working to get fuel where it is needed to prevent shortages, the broader economic impact of these high prices is being felt by everyone. The company is moving toward its 2027 targets, but the path there is paved with high costs for consumers.
Now, the backlash.
The revelation of BP's doubled profits has sparked intense criticism from campaigners and political figures. While the firm's preferred profit measure surged by over 130% to $3.2 billion, critics are calling these revenues horrifying. They argue that these gains come at the direct expense of households who are struggling with skyrocketing fuel prices at the pump. With oil prices jumping from the $60 range to over $100, the financial burden on ordinary people has become immense. Campaigners from Global Witness pointed out that we have seen this pattern before during previous conflicts. They argue that fossil fuel companies are raking in billions, while innocent civilians suffer the fallout of global instability and war.
The sentiment from advocacy groups is clear. They believe oil companies should pay for the damage caused by these price spikes. Friends of the Earth noted that global instability drastically inflates fuel prices, leaving ordinary people to pay the price. There are growing calls for the government to take action, especially as energy bills are set to rise again when the price cap is updated in July. While BP's leadership praises the quarter for strengthening the company's balance sheet, the public perception is one of deep unfairness. The contrast between corporate success and household struggle is becoming a central theme in the political discourse surrounding the energy crisis. It raises fundamental questions about energy security and corporate responsibility during wartime.
Next, the caregiving crisis.
A new report highlights a silent but growing hurdle for women's careers in America, the responsibility of caring for aging parents. The story of Allison Hale illustrates this perfectly. When her mother was diagnosed with a dementia-like condition, the burden of care fell almost entirely on her. Despite working full-time and raising 2 teenagers, she has to navigate a complex private care system and manage the high costs of memory care. This is not an isolated case. The Department of Health and Human Services estimates that up to 80% of elder care in the U.S. is performed by informal, unpaid caregivers. The majority of these people are women, specifically daughters, who are often left holding the bag when professional care becomes unaffordable or unavailable.
The financial and professional toll on these women is staggering. Many are forced to reduce their working hours, pass up promotions, or leave the workforce entirely to provide round-the-clock care. This unpaid labor is a massive drain on personal wealth and long-term earnings. While there is talk of a great wealth transfer from the boomer generation, many families will actually see their assets depleted by the high costs of long-term care. On average, caregivers incur over $7,000 in out-of-pocket expenses every year. For daughters like Hale, the emotional and physical exhaustion is compounded by the financial stress of watching a parent's savings disappear. It is a systemic issue that is increasingly defining the career trajectories of millions of American women.
Now, supermarket price warnings.
Retailers are warning that the full force of the Iran war is about to hit supermarket shelves. Although shop inflation actually dipped slightly in April, experts say this is merely the calm before the storm. The soaring cost of fuel is expected to trickle down to farmers, making it much more expensive to raise livestock and grow vegetables. Helen Dickinson of the British Retail Consortium noted that while consumer prices haven't fully reflected the conflict yet, it won't be long before they do. Retailers are already facing £10 billion in extra costs from domestic policies and taxes. When you add rising fertilizer and commodity prices to the mix, the pressure to raise prices for consumers becomes almost impossible for businesses to ignore.
Prime Minister Keir Starmer has urged the public not to panic, but he admitted that the economic pain could be long-lasting. Even if the Strait of Hormuz is reopened quickly, the damage to supply chains and energy costs will take time to resolve. Many consumers are still feeling the effects of the inflation shock from 2022 when food prices hit record highs. Retailers are trying to hold back price increases as long as possible to protect fragile consumer confidence, but the reality of accelerating inflation is looming. The Food and Drink Federation is also forecasting that food inflation will likely rise again. This creates a difficult environment for families who are already struggling to balance their budgets amid rising energy and housing costs.
Next, more on BP.
The criticism against BP continues to mount as more details of their astronomical profits emerge. The oil giant's $3.2 billion first-quarter profit represents a massive jump from the previous year. Campaign groups like the End Fuel Poverty Coalition are now calling for a windfall tax on firms profiting from the energy crisis. They argue that it is a startling reminder that when conflict drives up prices, energy companies profit while households pay the price. Brent crude reached nearly $120 a barrel at one point, and even though it has settled slightly, it remains above the $100 mark. This sustained high price is what is fueling these record earnings, while simultaneously threatening to plunge more people into a cost-of-living crisis.
BP's leadership maintains that they are playing a vital role in keeping fuel flowing during an incredibly challenging time. CEO Meg O'Neill emphasized that the company is focused on safe and reliable operations to minimize disruption to people's lives. However, the optics of such high profits during a period of global suffering remain a major political hurdle. The price of oil is up more than 60% so far this year, and the impact is being felt at every level of the economy. As the public watches these financial reports, the demand for corporate accountability and government intervention is growing louder. It is a tense standoff between the necessity of energy production and the ethics of wartime profit-making in a globalized economy.
Now, the remote work debate.
Skim's co-founder Emma Grede has made headlines by labeling working from home as career suicide. Speaking on a recent podcast, Grede argued that the downsides of remote work, such as loneliness and a lack of professional connection, are being ignored. She believes that being physically present in an office is essential for building the close relationships that lead to a long and happy life. Grede even linked remote work to broader social issues like declining birth and marriage rates. As the CEO of Good American and a prominent investor, her stance is part of a growing trend among executives who are pushing for a return to the office. She insists that the ability to see how an organization works from the inside is a huge career unlock.
Grade's comments didn't stop at remote work. She also expressed that asking about work-life balance during a job interview is a red flag. In her view, managing that balance is the employee's responsibility, not the employer's. This hardline approach has sparked a significant debate online, especially after she described herself as a max 3-hour mom on weekends. While some praise her drive and focus on high-impact memories with her children, others find her expectations for employees to be unrealistic in the modern world. Her perspective highlights the widening gap between traditional corporate expectations and the flexibility that many workers have come to value. It is a conversation that touches on the very nature of work, productivity, and personal well-being in the post-pandemic era.
Finally, central bank updates.
The world's most powerful central banks are expected to keep interest rates unchanged this week as they monitor the inflation shock from the Iran war. In what is likely to be a critical week for the global economy, the G7 central banks are prepared to issue warnings about the risks of rising prices. Markets are bracing for signals from the U.S. Federal Reserve, the Bank of England, and the European Central Bank. The concern is that a prolonged conflict could force these institutions to keep borrowing costs higher for much longer than originally anticipated. Analysts suggest the strategy will be to keep calm but stay vigilant, as the lack of energy flows continues to put immense pressure on global supply chains and inflation targets.
In the U.S., this is expected to be Jerome Powell's final meeting in charge of the Federal Reserve. He is widely expected to hold rates steady as the Middle East conflict stokes inflationary pressures in the world's largest economy. Similarly, the Bank of England is likely to stay cautious, with officials being super wary of making any knee-jerk moves until there is more clarity on the length of the war. Meanwhile, the UK government is under pressure to outline emergency energy support for households. The Chancellor is expected to restate a commitment to economic growth, but the reality of high borrowing costs makes that a difficult promise to keep. The global economy remains in a state of high alert as these geopolitical tensions continue.
That's our look at the stories shaping the world today. Thank you for joining us for this briefing. We will be back tomorrow with more updates on the news you follow most.